Hey family, welcome to the official YouTube page of One. I'm excited that you're here. This message is getting ready to bless your life. I want you to stay connected to the incredible things that are happening in this movement. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications. And if you want to partner with us in some of the great things that we're doing all over the world, you can give as well. Now it's time to get into this word. I love you. God bless you. Let's stay connected.
Family, once again, thank you for joining us. It's time to activate. I love that the people of God always remain hungry. It's not enough just to get one touch from God. In the middle of the week, you still decided I had to do what I had to do to meet the Lord where He said we needed to be. So family, welcome, welcome. It's time to activate. I'm excited. I'm raring to go. I cannot wait to get this word out of me. But before I do, I want to take the opportunity to do something. This season, actually this series of seasons has been one of the most, if not the most challenging, I will say for me, but certainly for those of you as well to have gone through. And I want to salute the leadership of this house. Pastor Teray Roberts, Pastor First Lady Sarah Jakes Roberts. I want to salute the leaders of this house. I want to salute my family, because without their leadership and their stewardship, not only of the word, but of what God has given them to do with the mission and the vision that is this house, I speak for myself. I don't know how we get through 2020 and 2020 part 2, otherwise known as 2021. But I wanted to give them their roses right here and right now. Matter of fact, if you're in the feed right now, go ahead and drop a rose for your pastors right now. I'm not waiting until the mission is finished to give them their roses right now. I'm not waiting until I feel that I'm comfortable enough to give them their roses right now. Because without their leadership, without them consistently stewarding this movement in and out, weaving us through one of the most crazy and chaotic series of seasons I've ever been through, I don't know where we would be right now. I mean that spiritually. I also mean that physically. I actually don't know where we would even be right now, but I'm grateful to God for the leadership of this house. I had to take a moment to shout them down. Go ahead. You can keep dropping roses while I talk. I'm about to read this word though. So if you can do both at the same time, that's cool. But let's go ahead and jump into the word of God. Let's see what God has in store for us on today. Today, I'm going to start in Joshua chapter 5. And just to give you a brief background on where we are in this season, in this text. I'll get to the season later as well. In this text, we find the children of Israel, and they are in their promised land, but they have not begun to take hold of the promise yet. And so now Joshua, who is their leader, is about to bring them forward and take them through the next important and major step towards fulfilling all that God has said is going to be for His people. So this is a very critical moment for Joshua and for the people of God, because it sets the tone and the stage for how the promise is going to be fulfilled. Now it says, we're in Joshua chapter 5, we're gonna go from verses 11 through 12. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna. I almost started to preach. But they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. For my family who loves to take notes, I'm praying that as many, if not all of you, the title for this message is Eat Different. So one of the things that struck me about this passage was how the Lord switched things up a little bit. And it reminded me of how I have had to switch things up a little bit. For me, I made a choice not too long ago to change the way that I train. For decades, I have been what I would like to call an endurance trainer. I'm one who trains for my endurance. So it's really been about a lot of cardio. It's been a lot of lung capacity work, a lot of training myself to exert energy for long periods of time. So I have been an endurance trainer for pretty much my whole life. And then sometime earlier this year, I made the decision, I wish I had made the firm decision, but I got a little inkling that maybe I should switch my training up and do something different. And so now I'm in the midst of training with resistance training. So now I'm not training to endure, I'm training to grow strength. And the thing with training to grow strength is now I have to do things differently. My workouts are different. I have been accustomed to working out a certain way for decades. Workouts that make me sweat like crazy and make me breathe super hard and leave me in a puddle of sweat on the floor, and burning calories and all that stuff is wonderful. I've been slim, been trim, I've done that. And now I'm entering into a phase where I'm training different. So I'm not training to endure, I'm training to gain strength. And if you understand how different it is to train to endure, when you're training to endure, when you're just training to keep yourself going, when you are in this season where all God is giving you to do is to endure, when he's given you the energy and he's given you the provision just to endure, it is different from when it is time to move from a place of strength. It's different when God begins to provide for you in such a way and set you up so that the moves you make are moves of strength. In other words, it's time to eat different. So I have to eat different now. I don't eat the same way I used to eat. I have to eat more of other things and much less of others. Now, I still have to eat in such a way where I am sustaining myself, but I am now eating to build strength instead of eating to build endurance. And they're two very different ways of eating, and it messed me up because at first I started to gain weight. And then the holidays came and I put on a little more weight. That's a different kind of weight. That's not even training weight. That's just eating too much weight. We're gonna work on that. But I noticed as I put on weight, my shape and my form was different. And I was now shaped and formed in a way I was not accustomed to because I'm used to being slim and I'm used to being trim and I'm used to having what they call cuts. I used to have them, don't have as much anymore. But once I said, we're working on that too. But my form, my shape, how I got used to seeing myself had to change because how you train for endurance is different than how you train for strength. Because when you train for strength, now you're training for your muscles to be stronger and for your muscles to be bigger. So my physique started to change. And if I'm honest, threw me for a loop. Who can come with me on this one? What happens when God starts to show you a different version of you that he's leading you to, and it's very unfamiliar, and it causes you to consume things that you have not consumed before to sustain a version of you that is being developed that you've never seen before, to birth a new you that you've never encountered before. And so now your routine has to change, and your mentality has to change, and your habits have to change, and your environment has to change. All so that you can get used to looking in the mirror and consistently seeing change. I wish somebody would holler in the chat right now because I know I'm not alone on this one. This has been a series of seasons of change, which means every time we look in the mirror, we think we know what we're supposed to see, and then God reveals a new version of us. God reveals a new version of how we are supposed to think about ourselves we ain't seen before. And it's foreign, and it can throw you for a loop. But it's all a byproduct of knowing that it's time to do things differently. And so this is where I was. It's time for me to eat different. And I have to get used to eating different, which means now what used to sustain and nourish me is not exactly the same as it was before. And this is where Joshua has the people of God now. And this is why I love this particular portion of the word right before they get to the promised land. God does a couple things. Let me talk about a couple of the things that God does before he prepares to get us into the promised land, before he prepares to prosper us, to move us forward into the promise that has already been laid out for us. Earlier in this section, one of the things he does is he has them be circumcised. Now, this is painful. The circumcision, I don't need to get into all of the details, but a piece of you has to be cut off. Who am I talking to right now? You want that promise, you do. You know the promise God has over your life. He's shown it to you. He's given you visions. He's even put you in portions of the promise already. But in order to advance, in order to move forward, we got to cut something off. We got to cut some things off. We got to cut some bad habits off. We got to cut some conversations off. We got to cut some encounters off. We have to cut some environments off. We have to cut some thoughts off. We have to cut off things that we thought were a part of who we are when they're really just a part of who we were, and they're not going to serve us to where we're going. So God says, before I advance my children, I got to have them cut some off. And so they had, watch this, to have the strength to cut something off. And it was painful. You see, in order to obtain the promise that God has over your life, when he calls us to sacrifice and he calls us to cut something off, it's going to be painful because it's something we believed was a part of who we were. Just as the children of Israel had believed up until this point that this thing that they were about to cut off was necessary because it was a part of who they were. And God said it has to go. Number one, he has them circumcised. He has them cut something off. And then number two is where we get to the title for this word. I thought it's so fascinating that here in verse 12, it says, then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land. You see, for 40 years up until this point, God has sustained his children with this wondrous, incredible, miraculous food called manna. Manna had never been seen before. It literally came from heaven. It was wafers that came from heaven. I know if you are still or have just finished enjoying your leftovers from Thanksgiving, you can understand what manna might have been like when food is just coming down from heaven and you just pull out your plate and all of a sudden there's food that you didn't prepare there. Come on, somebody who went to Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving, whichever giving you went to, I'm praying you were thankful for it, but you did not make everything that was on your plate. You looked on your plate, you pulled out your fork, you pulled out your knife, and went to work. But we didn't make everything that was on the plate, but we got to enjoy it. And now imagine the children of Israel being sustained by God for 40 years with manna and quail. All they had to do was walk out and the food fell from heaven. For 40 years, they never hunted. For 40 years, they did not have to lay in the cut under some leaves in painted fatigues trying to figure out if they were going to eat that night. All they had to do was walk out at the appointed time and bloop, food fell from the sky. They were sustained by this for 40 years. Who knows what I'm talking about right now? Even right now in your life, there are things sustaining you that God gave you, and you know you didn't do it by your hand. You know you couldn't have come up with this in the best parts of your imagination, but they have sustained you through seasons and season and season. Season after season, you have walked into an environment, you have walked into an arena, and God dropped the opportunity. God dropped the yes. God dropped the no. Sometimes even his no will feed you. God has continued to sustain you in such a way that you know you could never sustain yourself, just like the children of Israel found themselves in now. So for 40 years, they didn't have to worry about food. They didn't even have to worry about how to keep the food. They didn't have to worry about refrigeration. They didn't have to worry about microwaves. They didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. They just walked out, they ate. God not only provided for them, he even counted it for them. They didn't have to count calories. God counted it for them. They didn't have to count carbs. God counted it for them. They didn't have to count the protein. God counted it for them. In other words, God fed them to endure. God produced something from heaven that would allow them to be sustained and endure for seasons. Seasons where they did not have to fight. On record, there were 2 kings that the children of Israel had to deal with in the wilderness, and the only reason they had to deal with one of them was because he decided he didn't want to let them pass. So they had to fight one king, and then another king showed up right after that, had heard about the first king, he had to bow down too. Those were the only 2 encounters of conflict the children of Israel had externally. But internally, they had a whole other level of conflict. So while God was sustaining the body, God was also dealing with the issues of the heart. And this is why I love how God works, because he said, listen, these children don't have time to think about what they need to eat. They need to get their hearts right. I'm trying to bring them into something. God's trying to bring you into something. And you don't have time to worry about how I'm going to eat, where I'm going to eat. There's just seasons where God says, listen, I'll take care of the little things. I'll take care of how you're going to get fed. I'll take care of how you're getting where you need to go. I'll take care of all the details. But I need you to focus on what's happening in your heart, because the promise that I'm bringing you into requires your heart to be aligned with me. It requires your heart to be in a level of shape and fitness it has never been in before. It requires your heart to look a way you've never seen it before. So stop worrying about the food. Stop worrying about the clothes. Stop worrying about the details. Stop worrying about all the things that I can supernaturally take care of just by dropping it from heaven. The one thing God couldn't drop from heaven was the heart change that his children needed. And so the children of Israel find themselves being supernaturally sustained for 40 years. And now the moment has shown up and it's time to eat differently. I love the symbolism of what God did. He said, listen, I have fed you for 40 years. And you have not had to worry about food. You have not had to lift a hand to feed yourself. But in order for you to obtain the promise that I have for you, in order for the glory of who I am in its fullness to be shown through you, you gotta eat different. You can't eat the same way you ate in the wilderness. I know the wilderness is comfortable because the food's just falling from the sky and you don't have to worry about where it is you're going. But in order to lay hold of a promised land, in order to lay hold of a destiny, in order to lay hold of what God is trying to bring you into, number one, you need to be able to eat differently, because now it's not about endurance. The season of endurance was for the wilderness. Now it's a season of strength, because I'm bringing you to the place where you have to lay hold of your promise yourself. And we have to know when we're in a season where endurance is necessary and strength is necessary, because how we eat for each is different. What we consume for each is different. And so it's time for the children of Israel to eat different. They gotta grow up. It can't be God's gonna do it for me. God's gonna do it for me. God's gonna do it for me. They have done this the entire time. I love the children of Israel because they actually felt so entitled. They complained in the wilderness. Oh my goodness, where's the food gonna come from? Where are we going? Why is it so hard in the wilderness? We work so hard. They were acting like they got it out of the mud. They didn't get nothing out of the mud. They didn't do anything. They didn't pull themselves out of Egypt. God did the work to get them out of Egypt. It was God who did the supernatural wonders. It was God working on Pharaoh's heart. It was God who parted the Red Sea, and it was God who stopped the waters of the Jordan. God, up until this point, has done all of the work. But now it's time to enter into a promise. Family, now it's time to enter into a promised land. And when it's time to get your promise, God can't do all the work for us. because we have had our season to endure. We have had our season to work on our hearts. We have had our season to walk around. We have had our season to wonder. We have had our season to doubt. We have had our season for internal conflict. We have had our season to debate whether God's gonna do it. God, maybe, I don't know if he's there. I don't know if he's here. The season for debate was over. God had already settled it. He's already shown us he can supernaturally sustain us. And now it's time for him to show us what he can do through us. Strength time. It's time to train to be strong. And I don't mean physically strong. I mean spiritually strong. Spiritually strong meaning no matter what God put in front of the children of Israel, they had the history behind them of everything God had done. And they had the moment of covenant that was taking place right now to seal in their minds and seal in their hearts when it was time for them to move forward. God had fed them to the point where they did not even need to think about it. Word was their sandals never broke. They had clothes that lasted for 40 years. I got clothes in my closet that will barely last 4 months if I run them right. 40 years in the wilderness, brambles, sharp rocks, all types of crazy things, and the sandals stayed the same. They were pristine. I want a pair of these sandals right now. They had nothing of those matters to worry about. But now it's time for them to eat different. And so God does this incredible thing where he cuts off the manna while feeding them from Canaan. So God cuts off what is coming from heaven so that they can now get to work using their hands in the dirt. It was time for them to get their hands dirty. Who am I talking to right now? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Hands, I gotta get my hands dirty. I'm getting my hands dirty. I'm ready to work. Get that in the chat. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to work. It was time for the children of Israel to get to work. And by work, meaning it was time for them to not only know that God was going to do everything around them for them, it was time for the children of God to understand that God could also work through them. And that takes a different level of strength. That takes a different level of understanding. That takes a different level of connection and alignment with God. So the first thing you gotta do to get that connection and alignment with God, the first thing we have to do in order to get our strength ready is number one, we gotta cut some things off. And number two, we gotta get ready to eat different. And when you eat different, you have different expectations of that which you can do. When I was endurance training, I had certain expectations of what my body could do based on what I was training for. But now I'm strength training. And so now I have different expectations. And with different expectations comes some disappointments. I was very shocked to find myself breathless in about 6 or 7 minutes of a workout that I could do normally and go about 15, 20 minutes and barely break a sweat. My endurance was different. My stamina was different. What I was also surprised to find was that my kid can do pull-ups on my arm and he's almost 6 because I had gained strength in an area I didn't have before. But the expectations of the vessel have to be recognized as we are getting ready to consume and eat different. So this is why God says, I need to prepare these people. I need to prepare my children so that they can use their hands. They can give God the glory all they want for showing up. And this was the reputation of the children of God up until this point. People were afraid of them because of who was with them. And who was with them, meaning the Lord, would do around them. How the Lord would shift the atmosphere. He brought plagues, he brought locusts, he made the water bloody. He did all of these things that were outside of the people. But in order for the fullness and the glory of God to be known through who you are, to be known who he has created us to be, in order for that fullness to be reflected, it has to come to a point where God is working through you. When you show up, people are just as afraid of what God is going to do in your environment as they are, what is God going to do through you? What is God gonna do through this young lady? What is God gonna do through this brother? What is God gonna do through this person in this circumstance? And that's how we get the fullness of the understanding of the glory of God. This is where the children of Israel are about to enter. And so now it's time to eat different. It's time to stop looking to heaven and saying, Lord, drop it from heaven. And God is saying, if you're going to come into the promised land, you have to do. You have to understand my instruction. You have to know my heart. You have to know my desires. You have to have alignment with the vision that I have placed out in front of you. And now it's time to walk into it and through it. It's time to do. Oh, get this in the chat. It's time to do. It's time to do. It's time to do. I already know God can do it around me. I know God can do it for other people. Now I need other people to know God can do it through me. But that takes strength, because you have to have strength to lay down your prior expectations of who you were. It takes strength to tell your mind, yes, I know what I see, but my spirit knows the Lord. And if what I see doesn't match up with what the Lord has told me, I have to have the strength. I have to have the spiritual fortitude to tell my eyes that which is in front of me does not govern that which God has told me. That which God has told me governs that which is in front of me. I have to establish the order of my spirit and my mind so that my eyes always see clearly. That's not endurance, because endurance just says, I'm gonna stare at it and wait for God to do what he's gonna do. I'm just gonna stay right here and wait and wait and wait. That's endurance, and there's a season and there's a time for that. But then there's a time where it's, God, I'm here. As you created me to be, as you prepared me to be, as you had me in this wilderness season, now I'm here at the precipice of the promise, and it's time for me to do. I'm here to get my hands dirty. I'm ready to go to work, and I'm ready to eat different. I am ready to eat from the produce of the land. I love this so much. He gives them a nibble of the promise. Ooh. He gives them a little nibble of where they're gonna go. And this is for somebody. There comes to a point in time where you have to eat for where you're going, not for where you are. Don't side eye your Thanksgiving leftovers now. There comes a point in time where what you consume is about where God is taking you. What you consume is about the vision God has laid in front of you. What you consume is to prepare you for where God is taking you. What you consume is not about what's happening now. Because if you eat for now, you will stay in now until now is then. But when we consume, when we read, when we meditate on, when we pray over, and yes, at some point, what you put in your body as well, when you prepare yourself for where God is taking you, that's when we are eating different. That's when we are intaking different. That's when we're preparing different. And that's when our victory is different. They had to win on another level. And so now they are literally tasting the bread of the land, the grain of the land God has promised them. But I love this, because he cuts off the manna and he gives them bread from the promised land, but they have not driven anyone out yet. God was giving them a second chance. What do I mean by a second chance? The first time he gave them a preview of where they were going to go, the children of Israel had a moment, and this is early in Joshua chapter 1, I believe. If it's not 1, read the whole book of Joshua, and I promise you'll find it in there. But there was a season where the people of Israel were waiting to go into their promised land. This is before they wound up in the wilderness. And this was Moses who sent scouts out, and he said, go bring a report of what God has told us is ours. Now understand something. This report wasn't from Moses. Moses was not having a belief problem. Moses was walking with the staff, the same staff that turned into a snake, and then the snake turned back into a staff. God and Moses had worked their belief issues out way before this journey started. But this report, because he is a leader and he understands the hearts and the minds of the people he was leading, he knew they needed something. He said, oh no, these people disagree too much. They need something. Go give me a report. Come back with something that's going to make them move forward. Come back with something that's going to give them evidence. Come back with something so that I can lead these people forward. Who am I talking to right now? You're waiting for evidence, and you're waiting for a word, and you're waiting for something to come back to you when God has already given you that which you need. God has already given us that which we need, which was a promise. So he sends these people forward. A group of them come back and they talk of the goodness of the land, and everybody, out of the entire group, only 2 people are willing to move forward based on the fullness of the report. Let me say that a little simpler. A couple people came back and they said, the fruit's good, but the enemies are big and I don't know if we can handle it. And I'm here to tell you right now, you can handle it. Because there is nothing in your promised land that is bigger than your God. You can handle it. You can handle it. Focus on the fruit, not the enemy. Focus on the fruit, not the enemy. Who am I talking to right now? Focus on the fruit and not the enemy. Stop looking at the size of the enemy. Stop looking at the size of the inhabitants. Stop looking at the size of the people who are there, because the people who are there are the past tense. They're about to go, but that fruit is for you. That fruit is your promise. That fruit has been the part of God's vision since before you were born. That fruit has your name on it. That seed has your lineage on it. That seed has your vision on it. That seed has your glory on it. That seed has your purpose on it. And there's no enemy in that promised land. I don't care how big they are. I don't care how long they've been there. I don't care how big the aftershock of their step is. None of them are bigger than the God that you serve and the God who gave you the vision. Walk into your promised land right now. Walk right towards that fruit and stay focused on the fruit, because the fruit was put there for you, not for them, not for anyone else, not for your doubters, not for your haters, not for those who don't understand the things and the words of God. The fruit was put there for you. The vision was put there for you. The word and the promise was given unto you. So now the people of God had an issue, because they got a report that said, oh, these giants are so big, and they didn't go. The first time God gave them a taste of the land and they didn't go. They came back with fruit bigger than some of them were, and they were like, we can't handle all that. So this time, after 40 years in the wilderness, when all those people who had belief issues died off, God says, I'm gonna give you a taste. Eat of the grain of this land. Get ready to use your hands in the promised land. Get ready to use that which I have given you to draw that which I have given you. It's time for you who were made of dirt to get back to the dirt. Get your hands dirty. Get back to who I made you to be. I put something on the inside of you, and the only way the fullness of that thing is going to come out is if you reach inside of you and pull it out. I can't do that for you. God says you have to do that on your own. And that takes strength. And if you're gonna be strong, you gotta eat different. That means we read different. That means what we watch is different. That means who we listen to is different. And yes, what we eat in terms of food is different. But it's not even about the food. It is about our mentality and our spirit about that which we eat. That's another word. Don't make me go down that rabbit hole. I'm not gonna do that today. Maybe I'll catch y'all next year on that one. And so here, God is saying, I'm giving you another shot. Get yourself ready. And this time the children of God said, okay, we're gonna take this grain. No more manna? Cool. No more quail? Bet. No more birds? Okay, cool. We've never hunted before, but doesn't matter, because the God we serve is going to provide for us. We have never had to plant before. We have never had to harvest before. We don't even know about seed. The only seed we know of is the coriander seed that makes the manna that's coming from heaven. We don't know anything about getting stuff from the ground. Everything we've gotten has come from up there. And now we have to work to get things down here. But I love how God works, because sometimes God has to turn a thing upside down to make it right. Y'all been doing this. And it's time to do this. It's time to pull from what I gave you. Who am I talking to right now? It's time to pull from what God has already given you instead of waiting for God to give you more. And that's why we got to train different. Because there are seasons when it's time to endure. In your endurance season, all we do is wait and we say, I need new, I need more. It has to come from up here. And the only reason I can do this is because I need to endure. And if I wait and if I endure, it'll come from here. Meanwhile, God is saying, it's time for you to have strength and pull from that which is underneath your feet because I've given you the ground that you tread upon. Pull from what I've given you. Pull from where you are and focus on where I'm taking you, because what you pull from where you are and what you pull from what I have given you is going to sustain you and lead you into the fullness of what I have for you. Fam, we gotta eat different. We gotta eat different, like the children of Israel figured out. They said, okay, we're gonna do this differently from now on. From now on, we are going to eat on the level of the promise that God has for us, and we're not going to need manna. The manna was for a season. Yeah, the manna was comfortable, but the comfort was for those who didn't believe. Do not be stuck in the mindset and mentality that it has to be easy. And if it's easy, it comes from God, because there are seasons where the reason that it's easy is because we are having a belief problem. If it was easy, we wouldn't have to believe. If it was easy, we would not have to have faith. If it was easy, we would just do. We wouldn't even think about it. We wouldn't have to have conversations with God. And then we get tricked and we say, well, this has to be easy because it's God. It's for me. It's the vision. And that's not even in the word. There was nothing easy about what the children of Israel were about to do. Family, these people got circumcised with sharp rocks. This is a problem. And they said, if that's what we need to do, let's go. If I need to learn how to hunt, let's go. If I need to learn how to sew, let's go. They're giants, they're huge, don't care. Let's go. Because I can't go out like the people before me who have belief problems. Study the people who have come before you and have belief problems, and do yourself a favor and don't do what they did. Because the reason that they didn't get to where they were supposed to go is because there was a belief and a faith problem. They tried to eat for endurance when it was time to be strong. And there are levels and seasons. There are seasons when it's time to endure. I'm not saying don't have endurance. Please do, but there comes a point in time where our spirit and our mind have to train ourselves to allow ourselves for the strength of God to be worked through us. And that's why I love this moment so much. Get this in the chat. This word God dropped in my mind, agent. I'm an agent. I am an agent. I'm an agent. Go ahead, put that down. And while you're typing that in the comments, I want to read this definition of agent. An agent, this is in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, a person who acts on behalf of another person or group. I love this because the children of Israel were not acting on behalf of themselves. They were acting on behalf of the Lord. These were his children and God had sent them. And when you walk on behalf of somebody, come on, when you are repping the brand, you walk in the room different. When you are repping the Lord, you walk in with a sense of ownership that says, this is mine because he has sent me and said so. Because I've eaten to prepare myself. I have sustained myself to prepare. I have already used the strength to transform my mind and renew my mind and gather my heart to be in line with this vision that I'm about to step into. I'm built for this. I'm not enduring in this season. I'm not here to endure. I'm not in this room to endure. I'm here endowed with the strength of the Lord to take that which God has said is for me. Strength training. An agent, a person who acts on behalf of another person or group, so you know you are acting on behalf of the Lord. Number 2, this is the one. A person or thing that takes an active role or produces a specified effect. It's one thing to be strong, I get it. But it's another thing to be strong because you know what you're after. The children of Israel had a vision. They said that land is ours. That promise is ours. That vision is ours. And those around us who would keep us out of it have died off. This is ours. I'm an agent. I'm an agent. I need everybody in the chat to claim that. I am an agent. I am here on behalf of the Most High God to claim that which God has said is for me. I am here on behalf of the Most High God to serve the vision that He has put forth and made me a part of. I am here on behalf of the Most High God to take an active role and produce a specified effect. The children of Israel had just been chosen for one of the greatest roles in the Bible, which is to go into a land with things that were bigger than they were, a land they had never been to before, a land where they were going to have to learn to eat different, act different, live different, be different, all while having to drive out giants who were laughing at them. Who am I talking to right now? They were here to be the blueprint for us and how to do it. They said, listen, we have a specified effect, and we're here to take an active role in it. I have nothing wrong with God doing it around me. I have nothing wrong with God taking the waters and literally making them appear to be walls. I love when God stops the waters in the east, stops the waters in the west, and allows me to walk right on through into my promised land on dry land. I love that God works like that. But what I really love as well is understanding I work with a God in fullness, which means He can also take me and place me in battle. He can also take me and place me in front of my enemies, and my enemies will fall by the sword that God has given me, the sword being the word of God that I have been meditating on and keeping in mind and aligning my heart with. So now my enemies have to bow by the sword. My enemies have to fall by my sword. Who am I talking to right now? Your enemies are supposed to fall by your sword, and your sword is your word. What was the word that God gave you that allowed you to start to take the journey on the way to the vision that He gave you when this whole thing started? That's your sword. That's what your enemies are going to fall by. They're not going to fall by your big words. They're not going to fall by your big antics. They're going to fall by the word and how we wield it. And wielding that word takes strength. It's time to wield the word of God over the enemies that God has placed, over the inhabitants that God has placed in the land that He has promised. It's not time to shout. It's not time to throw earthly weapons at this thing. We're talking about a supernatural event that we have been made a part of. God will have us slay our enemies in any number of ways, and I love how He does it, because in the very next encounter right after this one, He has them march around Jericho. He doesn't have them fight immediately. Wait a minute, these people don't know how to fight. They haven't been in a fight. They're not ready for that yet. Let's have them walk around Jericho. I'm going to give them an opportunity to watch how I work in this arena. And then when the next battles came, it was time for them to use their swords. A quick word about walking around in a circle, and this is for you. If you feel like you've just been circling this thing, and God told you it was gonna fall, and you've been walking around in a circle, and you're saying, Lord, why are you having me continue to retrace my steps around this thing? When is this wall gonna fall? I need you to understand it's not just about the wall falling. You see, when you walk in a circle, you see the end in the beginning. That's how God is trying to get you to have vision. God says, I need you to walk and fight like me, which means when you fight, you see the end in the beginning. That's why I got you walking around in the circle. This is the beginning of me walking in the circle. When I go around in my circle, I'm gonna wind up right back here. Now this is the end. When I started, this was the beginning, but now I'm standing in the end. I saw the end in the beginning. Just how God does it, and just how God does it is how I need to do it if I'm gonna take down every inhabitant that is in the promised land that God has for me. That's why He said, I need y'all to walk around in a circle. I need you to see the end in the beginning. I need you to understand this wall is going to fall. I don't need you to walk with doubt. I don't need you to slow down. I don't need you to speed up. I need you to walk at the exact pace I tell you, because you've already seen the wall fall as you walk. But this comes from having worked in such a way where we say, Lord, we're ready to eat different. God, I'm ready to eat different. God, I'm ready to eat for strength. I have endured. I know how to endure. You're going to teach me to endure again for another season. That's wonderful. But I'm here to eat for strength. I'm here to be an agent. I'm here to get my hands dirty. I'm here to let my hands do the walking as you do the talking. I'm ready for you to use me. I'm ready for you to work through me. And I don't have issues which say God can't work through me, which prevent you from working through me and having to work through somebody else. We did that in the wilderness. We don't have that issue anymore. God, I'm here. I'm here. I'm standing right at the precipice of my promise. And you've given me a little nibble, a little taste of my promised land. And I said, yes, it's good. And now I'm going to take it. And so this is the season that I really do believe that the people of God are in. I love this second definition of agent, a person or thing that takes an active role and produces a specified effect. I just want to leave you with this, people of God, family of God, brothers and sisters of God. What is your specified effect? Because what allowed the children of Israel to ultimately walk into and take over their promised land, what allowed Joshua to lead his people to take down over 30 kings when Moses could only take down 2? What allowed these people to do that which their predecessors did not do is there was a specified effect. They knew what they were after. And if you're having a season right now, if you're having a moment right now where you are not sure, where you're feeling as if I should be strong now, I'm eating different, but I don't feel the same strength I'm supposed to be walking in, back up. What is my specified effect? Because I don't want to just be an agent for random. What specifically am I training for? I know what I endured. Now I need to know why I endured it and how it made me stronger for what's coming. So now it is, Lord, what is coming? Some of us need to revisit the promise. Oh, it's hard when you work and you endure and endure and endure, and you literally have endured for so long you have forgotten the promise. Get that in the chat. I'm revisiting the promise. I'm gonna revisit the promise. What was the promise? What was the promise? I've been fighting, I've been enduring, I've been here, I've been in the wilderness for so long, I don't even remember what the promise, I don't even remember how I got to the wilderness. If you don't remember how you got to the wilderness, that's when we can't figure out how to get through the wilderness. If we forget that God brought us through the wilderness, if we forget how God worked on our behalf to get us to the wilderness, we will never leave the wilderness and we will never enter into the promised land. And when the manna runs out, we'll be hungry. Fam, I want to leave you with this. Be ready to eat different. Be ready to train different. This past year and a half, 2 years, as I spoke of earlier, one of the things I had to learn was I have to eat and train different because I had to endure in a way I had never had to endure before. I had to endure time management and challenges and all of these things. I had never endured these things before. I had never been there before, so I had to learn to consume and eat different. I didn't always have 4.5 hours to be up in front of my computer watching the word. I'm gonna watch PT, and then I'm gonna watch First, and then I'm gonna watch Bishop, and then I'm gonna watch this. I didn't have that kind of time. I had to find a way to eat different. So now I've got one headphone on doing that which God has called me to do, and I'm refreshing my mind from the vision I got from Sunday's word. And then I got another headphone on. When this word cuts out, I charge this headphone, boom, I'm on to the next word, but I'm also doing the next thing God has called for me to do. And so now I'm working. Now I'm taking in, now I am consuming, and I'm doing it because I know that which I am taking in is preparing me for where I'm going. But I gotta eat it different. And I have to ingest it different, and I have to utilize it different because it's promised land time. My promise is on the line. And I can't afford to lose out on my promise because I didn't eat right. Because I was waiting for manna when it was time to take from the land with my own hands. And I'm not gonna sit here and tell you what I'm asking to do, what I'm calling for us all to do is easy. So I leave you with this. And I love that Joshua, as I said earlier, read the whole book, started with this. Joshua 1 and 9, I'm gonna leave you with this. This is the Lord speaking. He said, have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage? Be strong. Now, we're not talking about endurance right now. You're walking into your promised land. Be strong. We're not in the wilderness right now. Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Even now, as we are preparing ourselves to enter into whatever this next season has for us, the idea that the Lord our God is with us where we go has to evolve, because it's no longer just God is with me, so he's prepared a way for me and he's gone before me and he's done things before me. I love that. It is the truth. But the whole of it is, and oh, by the way, the reason I know God is with me is because God is in me and he's working through me. That's the fullness. That's where the strength and the courage comes from. Says, nah, I'm not gonna be afraid. I know who's working in me. I know the power of eternity is at work in me and can work through me anywhere, any place, anytime. I have no reason to be afraid. Now it's time for me to add to my tool belt strength. So we've talked a lot, about walking into a promised land and understanding what a journey with God can be like. And I promise you, it was incredibly frustrating for the children of Israel to be in a wilderness for seasons. But understanding that God sustained them through it, and how God sustained them through it was different from what God used to get them to it and past it. That's understanding the fullness and the breadth of God. Why am I bringing up the fullness and the breadth of God? I believe right now, family, there are some people who have had just a partial glimpse or a partial view. Maybe this is your first time having an encounter with the Word of God. I want this to be a place. PT talked about marking a word and an encounter as an altar. Let this be an altar right now for those of you who want to begin a full work and a full vision and a full walk with God. If this is your first time having an encounter with the Lord and you say, you know what? I need to make this a regular thing. I need to make this a lifestyle. I need to make a decision right now and use the strength and the courage that is on the inside of me to join with the one who made me. If you want to start walking with God, come on right now. If you want to start a life where you're walking with Jesus right now, come on down. And if you want to refresh, you've made the commitment once, you made the commitment 4 or 5 times, and something happened along the way. Somehow you got caught up in the wilderness and forgot how you got there. And now I'm extending this invitation to you. Come on now to the King of Kings. Come on now to the Lord of Lords. Come on now and say, Jesus, remind me of who you are so I can start walking with you again. Let's start that life right now. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you've marked this moment as a moment and a time for your children to walk with you and to know that you are at work in us and that you can work through us. Thank you for allowing us to start all over again with you if we need to, and thank you for allowing us to start. If somebody is just getting to know you for the first time, Father, I thank you that you have shown yourself mighty and strong and loving and compassionate and patient and just awesome like you are, Father. And I pray, Father, that you continue to cover and bless and move and mature and grow those who have decided today is the day they will begin to walk with Jesus. Today is the day they will begin to eyeball their promised land differently. And today is the day that they will eat differently of the land that you have provided. Father, we honor and we praise you and we say thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.